Hello there. Welcome to Planet America's Fireside Chat. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chad Licciardello.
This week, we're going to take you to Springfield, Ohio to see how a racist urban myth peddled by Donald Trump is affecting that community and how they feel about a possible visit from the former president.
We've also had another assassination attempt, and then 2024 said, hold my beer, because now we've also got a sex and Nazi scandal that could decide a crucial swing state.
It has been another extraordinary roller coaster ride of a week in American politics, and two stories dominated the presidential campaign: the second apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump and Trump's attempt to whip up anti-immigrant sentiment by repeating these false stories about Haitian immigrants eating people's pet cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. Now, Trump says he is going to go to Springfield, and in what might have been his idea of a joke, he seemed to imply that he could be killed there.
32,000 illegal immigrants come into the town, 32. So they almost doubled their population in a period of a few weeks. Can you believe it? And you know what? They've got to get much tougher. I'm going to go there in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to Springfield and I'm going to Aurora. You may never see me again, but that's okay. Got to do what I got to do. Whatever happened to Trump? Well, he never got out of Springfield.
Well, he's philosophical about possibly being killed. A lot to unpack there, I suppose, Chaz. First point to make is Trump is now saying the Haitians in Springfield are illegal. They are not. That is not true. They are legally living and working in America under a special visa category for people fleeing ongoing violence in Haiti. So not only is he making that bit up and he is spreading this racist urban myth, he now says he wants to go to the town and basically throw fuel on the fire that he helped to start. Vice President Harris was asked about the situation in Springfield in what was only her second major interview since becoming the presidential nominee last month. Here's what she said at a forum this week organised by the National Association of Black Journalists.
Engaging in that hateful rhetoric that, as usual, is designed to divide us as a country, is designed to have people pointing fingers at each other. It's designed to do that.
Now, I don't know about you, Chaz, but when Trump started talking in the debate about Haitians eating cats and dogs, I thought maybe it was just something that popped out of his mouth because Laura Loomer had said something about it on the plane heading to Philadelphia, or JD had just tweeted something about it, and he just blurted it out. But clearly, he's doubling down, tripling down on this. It appears now to be a definite strategy, doesn't it?
All right, there's no doubt. And I'll tell you how you know for a fact. It's because he started now on a second town, Charleroi in Pennsylvania, which has a lot of Haitians as well. There are immigrants all through rural America. He's picking on Haitians. And so,
Haitians in swing states, like Pennsylvania, it seems.
Yeah, so it's clearly deliberate to try and keep this topic going, try and keep immigration in the news, where he polls very well. It's probably his strongest poll in the area. Try and keep them talking about immigration all the way to the election. I'll tell you another thing you know that at least J.D. Vance knows that these rumours are not true. And I'll tell you why you know that. Because the Wall Street Journal revealed a few days ago that way back at the beginning, when J.D. Vance was tweeting out about this cats and dogs stuff, he made the terrible mistake, he'll never make this mistake ever again, of actually trying to fact check his own claims. He rang up city officials, or he got a staffer to ring up city officials to say, now, do you guys have some evidence about this? And they said, no, this is not true. This is they categorically said there is no truth to this whatsoever. And how he responded that night? He doubled down even harder, and he went on from there. So you know that this is all very deliberate. I'll tell you what annoys me about this in particular, though. I mean, there's a lot of things that annoy me about this.
Sure.
But one of the things that hasn't been reported much is that, yeah, sure, they're beating up on Haitians. They're also beating up on the exact people they say they support. Because Springfield, back in 2012, Gallup found that it was the least happy town in America.
Long before the Haitians arrived.
Long before the Haitians arrived. It was a dead town. It was completely screwed up. And the Haitians have been part of the revitalisation of Springfield. Yeah, they've got their problems. No, there's no doubt about that. But they're a lot better off where they were. And he says that we're just listening to our constituents complaining about about the problems they're facing. But, his constituents aren't saying get rid of the immigrants.
Right.
His constituents are saying give us more funding to help us deal with the immigrants who we need to make the place survive.
Right, which isn't the Trump Republican Conservative way of dealing with this, because if you want to fix the problems, you build more schools, you build more hospitals, you have a bigger role for government providing social services, which means you spend more money, which means you have to tax people more. Or instead, you demonise immigrants and say, get out. We'd rather go back to 2012 when the town was dying and nobody went to school.
So exactly. So they're not just screwing over the Haitians, they're screwing over the very people they say that they're trying to help. So I find that very disingenuous and bad faith. Yeah. Let me ask you one quick question though.
Yeah.
Because we talked about, we referred to the assassination and we've got this as well. These two stories, they intertwined a lot this week, in particular about rhetoric. Because you had a situation where the left were trying to blame J.D. Vance and Trump for the bomb hoaxes in Springfield because of their rhetoric, and the right were trying to blame the left for Trump's assassination attempt because of the left's rhetoric. And both of them were denying the other side had a point. So both of them had double standards. My question to you is, are they both right? Is both their rhetoric a problem? Are they both wrong, that neither of them have a problem with the rhetoric? Or is it somewhere in between?
It's an interesting question, because you could argue that some of the rhetoric around Trump tends to dehumanise him in a way that somebody might think it's appropriate to take a shot at him, saying that he's a dictator and a fascist, is saying, I guess, that he is less than human or less than socially acceptable or politically acceptable. Saying that Haitian immigrants eat cats and dogs is, again, a dehumanising othering of them. So it's an interesting argument. The fact is that the bomb threats, the hoaxes that have been going around, where we've seen schools and hospitals and shops evacuated, according to the Ohio Governor, Republican Mike DeWine, there's evidence that this is coming from overseas. This isn't crazies in America or neo-Nazis in America that are doing this. This is a foreign actor, we don't know, Russia, Iran, somebody else, putting in these bomb threats just to sow more division. Which is hard to do much about. What you can do something about is having a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate peddling known lies that are racist tropes. Mm-hmm. Reagan wouldn't have done this. Clinton wouldn't have done this. Obama certainly wouldn't have done this. Why are Trump and Vance, and it's not even new. Eating cats and dogs, I mean, fools were saying that about Southeast Asian immigrants in the 70s and 80s. It's a tired old trope. It is not true. It keeps coming back, and a presidential and vice presidential candidate should know better. That's where I hold them responsible for their rhetoric, disconnected from any individual acts of violence or threats of violence.
I think I'm inclined to agree with you in that I think free speech is an issue here, and the ability to campaign is obviously an issue. You've got to be able to criticise your opponents when you feel it's legitimate. Sure. But if you're in a dodgy area, you need to be careful with what you say. You can critique while being accurate and taking care. And I feel at times both the left when they're talking about Trump, I feel they get a bit loose sometimes with the dictator talk. And there's no doubt that J.D. Vance and Trump have gotten real loose with the cats and dogs talk. And so all I would say is that while I don't blame anyone in particular, I think that the climate becomes more and more conducive to violence. The more you raise the rhetoric, and sure, if you need to make a point, but make it carefully and make it accurately. And I think that we're losing that a bit.
Yeah. Ultimately, this debate is not between individuals with differences of opinions. It's between two extreme, grotesque caricatures of each other. And there's never going to be any common ground there. Meanwhile, Trump is continuing to try and rewrite history when it comes to last week's debate with Kamala Harris. Polls, of course, showed that Trump lost the debate. He says he won the debate, and now he claims the audience showed their anger at the moderators who were fact-checking him during the debate, including Trump's false claims about Springfield, Ohio. Here's what he said.
They didn't correct her once, and they corrected me everything I said practically, I think 9 times or 11 times, and the audience was absolutely, they went crazy.
The audience went crazy, did they? Because as I recall, these were the rules of the debate.
There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center.
There was no live audience in the room for the debate. Now, maybe Trump meant the pro-Trump TV audience then went crazy online, but it seems like a flat-out lie. In fact, let's call it malarkey, Chaz.
The crowd did not applaud once for Kamala Harris.
No, the silence was deafening, that is for sure.
Look, the fact is that it doesn't really matter what he says. We know that he knows he lost. Everyone knows he lost because the number of excuses that have been made for the last 2 weeks. Kamala Harris has been making excuses, but Trump's side has made a million excuses.
It's 3 against 1.
Yeah, but not just that. The earrings her earring was actually a receiver, said some Trump supporters. It went on forever. The lights were unfair. The camera angle was unfair. Everything was unfair. I thought that, like I said on the show at the time, I thought the moderators were a bit biased with their topic selection and the number of follow-ups they did on Trump versus Kamala Harris, although they might have followed up on Kamala Harris a bit more if Trump didn't interrupt every single time to get the last word. Yeah. So that didn't help. But the moderators aside, they've had 1,000 excuses, the most laughable excuses. And the fact that his supporters are so desperate to make excuses tells me they know he lost.
Yeah, well, on the question of fact-checking, I say this as a former fact-checker for the ABC myself. If you don't want to be fact-checked, get your facts right. Sure. It's pretty straightforward. Now, for more on the situation in Springfield, Ohio, earlier today we spoke to Denise Williams. She's president of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured Persons. And we wanted to know from her what the mood in Springfield is like this week and whether indeed she even feels safe right now walking down the street. Here's what she said.
I don't walk down the street in Springfield. Yes, because I have to look everywhere. You know, we have these gangs here, and you know, back in the day they wore sheets and stuff over their faces so you don't know who they are. So right now, they don't have sheets over their faces because you can see now who they are. So yes, I don't walk anywhere. I do have protection if I need to go out to the grocery store and that, and you know, you find yourself doing this, looking around. Yes. And yesterday I was at the pharmacy getting medicine for this cold, and all of a sudden I saw a lot of you know, people, it was like a sense of urgency. So I was saying to myself, I said, listen, what is going on? So when I got into the store, what was happening was stores all over the city was closing because of bomb threats. But the one I was in was still open. So folks was coming in there. I mean, it was crowded. And I kind of felt like, okay, why is everybody kind of urgently going into the store? But they needed to get their groceries. And, you know, and the Haitians here, they opened up a restaurant that I have yet to visit. And I'm planning to go there. These are people who have acclimated with our community, and to have this, it's a travesty.
Can I ask, are there many migrants in Springfield who aren't Haitian? Because people seem to be acting like Haitians are the only migrants in Springfield.
Well, no, there are other races here, and that's the confusing part. There's Mexicans here, there is a lot of different mixed races, and to just when like the Mexicans come here and other denominations, it wasn't nothing close to this. I gotta say to you that this is really up close and personal racism. This all has to do with the color of the skin. Trust me.
So, Denise, do you think that's all there is to this, that it's racism pure and simple?
Pure and simple. Because none of this happened when the Mexicans came, when there's some Indians, you know, I don't know if I'm using the right term. If I'm not, please forgive me. But there are all kinds of races that has migrated here to Springfield. And none of this ever happened.
Can we talk a little bit about how much Springfield has changed in recent years, Denise, with not just the arrival of the Haitians to work there, but other migrants as well? What's been going on in the town?
Well, it is a great impact. Now, I must say that. I mean, it's impacting the housing here. It is also impacting the social services that's here, hospitals, schools. We really wasn't prepared for this, but like all things, there are growing pains, and this can be handled, but all at once we have an influx of people without any financial help for our city. We definitely need more translators. We need more teachers. But the Haitian community, they are so well-rounded people. They are educated. You have people that are doctors. They're lawyers. There's some teachers here. I mean, these guys are hardworking guys. And they're just like any other people in any other community.
And before the migrants showed up, what state was the town in your view?
Well, I've been here for over 30 years. And I mean, we have problems just like any other city, but you know, we are able to work through those. This feels a little different. And especially when we get comments from government, it feels different. This is a whole different kind of feeling here. And in all my years of being in Springfield, we got issues, grant that, but nothing of this magnitude, nothing.
Now, when you say you've seen no issues of this magnitude before, you don't mean the magnitude of the migrants being there, do you? You mean the magnitude of the reaction to the migrants being
Absolutely. So much hatred. And I'm telling you, it is this, it can't be anything else. It's not, see, because I can compare when the Mexican community moved in. I mean, we welcomed them with open arms. So now we have Haitians here. The only difference is the color of their skin. And the folks are making a huge deal out of why they are in the community, you know, and I can't put my arms around it.
And Denise, what has been the effect of being at the centre of this national, international media storm with all of these false rumours about people eating cats and dogs?
Well, you know, it all started when a young sweet boy, 7, was on the school bus with other children, and a Haitian veered over in the left lane and killed the young boy and injured multiple children, which was a sad day in Springfield. We all here mourned with that family. However, they, meaning some folks in the community, turned it into like, this is hatred. And I try hard to calm that rhetoric down because it was pure and simple an accident. We've had lots of accidents here, you know, even before the Haitians even came here. So now that they're here, granted, they need to be taught and they need to learn the skills in driving. I get that. But never has an accident been made such a big deal. And race, they tried to put race in it, and race has absolutely nothing to do with the accident. But since then, it's been outrage.
Now, Denise, since the town's been at the centre of controversy, how has that manifested itself? Has there been troublemakers turning up? Has there been actual violence? What have the consequences been?
Right now, even this morning, there have been bomb threats. Every day, we're waking up to 3, 4 bomb threats in the city where they had to evacuate. Right now, this morning, I hear that one of our grocery stores has closed down because there was a bomb threat. And then the university, I believe, on the crime monitor is saying that a suspicious package has been found at one of our universities. And I'm gonna tell you, there's no day since all of this has started, since all of this false rhetoric has surfaced, we are waking up each and every day to some businesses had to close due to bomb threats. So every day we don't know, is there going to be a bomb go off, or are there going to be any packages left at like my door or my office, hence why I closed the office. My concern is my team, my concern is the community, my concern is my family. We are all at risk at this point. If your skin is dark, we are at risk every moment of the day.
Denise, former President Trump is now saying that he is going to visit Springfield, Ohio, and that when he does, he might disappear, presumably that he might be killed. What do you make of all of that?
I need him to not come here. We don't need him here. He's done enough. He has done enough. And I heard that this morning. He's saying he'll be here in 2 weeks. And if you coming, why are you going to disappear? That right there lets me know that he's not coming here with good intentions. Listen, we do not need him to come here, any place in Ohio right now. He has continued this false negative with his running mate, and we cannot continue to fuel that fire. So why on earth is he saying he's coming here, but he might disappear? So it's like, I'm coming here, I'm gonna stir the pot some more, but then I'm gonna run. No, just don't come.
Denise Williams, thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
We've talked before about the controversial Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, who's running for governor this November. He has the backing of Donald Trump to become what would be the first black governor of the state. But Robinson's past and indeed recent comments on race, gender and sexuality have been problematic, to say the least. Robinson has described transgenderism and homosexuality as, quote, filth, and says that women should be led by men. He has also said that he would like to go back to a time when women could not vote. And you'll be shocked to hear he's also a conspiracy theorist who, quote, wouldn't be surprised if 9/11 turned out to be an inside job, the moon landing was faked, and he is seriously sceptical that JFK was assassinated. And that was all before he became the Republican Party's nominee for governor of North Carolina. Not surprisingly, he's not doing particularly well in the polls at the moment, trailing Democrat Attorney General Josh Stein, who's also running for governor, by 5 and 8 points in 2 polls this week. At the presidential level, North Carolina is a battleground that Democrats haven't won since Obama in 2008, and it could be a key to deciding the White House this year. In the average of polls right now, Trump leads Harris by just 0.2 of a percentage point. And that's why this matters.
CNN claims that Robinson made several inflammatory comments on a message board of a pornography site more than a decade ago. The comments allegedly were made under a different username. ABC News has not confirmed this reporting. In them, though, someone who is identified by CNN as Robinson expresses support for reinstating slavery and apparently called himself a black Nazi at one point.
And there's a lot more besides that, much of it frankly not appropriate for broadcast. Suffice to say, it could cost Robinson the election, although he is, for now at least, denying the comments were made by him, and he is refusing to step down from the campaign.
Let me reassure you, the things that you will see in that story, those are not the words of Mark Robinson. You know my words, you know my character, and you know that I have been completely transparent in this race and before. Folks, this race right now, our opponents are desperate to shift the focus here from the substantive issues and focus on what you are concerned with to salacious tabloid trash. We cannot allow that to happen.
This whole affair does carry a danger for Donald Trump too, if it reminds enough conservatives of Trump's own personal scandals, the boasts about sexual assault, being found liable for sexual abuse, being found guilty of paying hush money to a porn star. That could see some Christian conservatives and some Republican-leaning black voters in the state switch to Kamala Harris or stay home. But either way, it could help Kamala Harris win the state of North Carolina and maybe in doing so win the White House. I guess the first question, Chaz, is he's denied it. Is there any doubt in your mind that this is true?
No. No, there's no doubt in my mind at all. They've really done a job on him, CNN. Like, they did their work. Let me just go through some of the reasons why they said it was him. Number one, the profile had his email address. That's a pretty big one, right, that he had used on a number of other sites. Number two, the profile on the forum where they were chatting said how long he'd been married, same as Mark Robinson. Number three, where he lived, same as Mark Robinson. Number four, when he served in the army, same as Mark Robinson. Number five, he posted about the same products. And what I'm talking about there is very specific things like reviews for remote-controlled helicopters, both on this site and as Mark Robinson off this site. his attraction to specific celebrities and his favourite Twilight Zone episode are the same as Mark Robinson. The reviews also of products and places that Robinson had been positive about outside the site. And finally, this is the best one, a YouTube playlist for a user with the same name only featured videos of Mark Robinson.
Right.
So, and this is before he was a politician.
So he could claim identity theft and hacking and all the things that Anthony Weiner tried to come up with. But at the end of the day, it seems that this other person is a Mark Robinson fan and thinks very much like him, has a very similar life story to him too.
Very similar life
so
story.
it does look very, very sus. Yeah. Other things have come out as well, that he was on the adultery site, Ashley Madison as well. So this poses lots of questions about his morality. But I guess the content, it's the hypocrisy of the content. There's obviously the stuff where anyone who says, yeah, Hitler's better than most people in Washington, I'd own some slaves if we had slavery now, and I consider myself to be a black Nazi. That's all pretty bad. And then there's the stuff about abortion and transgenderism and everything else. What is the worst of all this?
Look, I think you've done a pretty good job there, going through the worst of them all. But my question to you, I think you've covered it off nicely. I'll throw a question back at you, which is, this is all 12 years ago, right? And more, 12, 15 years ago. He's already established that he was a hypocrite when it comes to abortion with his wife. That he pressured her to get an abortion, and now he's sorry about that. So hypocrisy is already on the table for this guy. So my question is, if all he's done is said some stupid things about Hitler and slavery and shown hypocrisy that we already knew, and this is 12, 15 years ago, is there a statute of limitations on this? I mean, there's a pretty good chance he was joking about the Hitler stuff as well, I should add, because that's what he's like. He's very borderline sometimes when he's joking, when he's not. But do you think there's a statute of limitations on being very offensive on a porn site?
I think if he's talking about being a peeping Tom when he was in his teens and fantasies he still has about that, that's pretty icky. But is that relevant to him, running now to be governor of the state? Voters can decide that. I think it's ultimately up to voters to decide whether boasting about wanting to own slaves and being a black Nazi is disqualifying or not. I would say, Nazism and slavery are probably two of the top issues that you cannot claim to have changed your mind on. Once a Nazi, pretty much always a Nazi, even if you go to Argentina or you're a black guy running for governor of North Carolina. Yeah,
look, I'd say I'm comfortable with the idea of people saying things like, statute of limitations, he can still run. Yeah, he can run. But we can also say that he's a complete joke.
And judge his character as well. I mean, there's a question of character. If this person is going to be governor of the state, a very, very powerful office, making decisions, ultimately his job is to make decisions on behalf of millions of people who are voters and taxpayers. This guy has made some really bad decisions in his life.
He certainly has.
And he should be judged on those.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, correct. Now, there has been an almost 1 point shift towards Kamala Harris in the average of national polls since the day of the debate last week. Pre-debate, Harris led by 2.5 points. This week, it is 3.3 percentage points nationally. That's being driven by a few polls that have put Harris 5, 6, even 7 points ahead of Trump. But you'd have to say it is a more mixed picture if we go down to some of the battleground state polls this week, including a series of polls from Quinnipiac, and they're pretty reputable. Harris holds a 5-point lead over Trump in Pennsylvania and in Michigan as well. That's the good news for her. Bit of a worry, though, is Wisconsin all of a sudden. She had been doing well, but in this poll, just 1 percentage point ahead. That's just one poll, of course. On average, she leads there by almost 3, but Harris needs to win all 3 of those, of course, in the Rust Belt to win in November. Otherwise, it gets very, very tricky through the Sun Belt and the West. There's nothing yet to suggest this second apparent assassination attempt against Trump has changed people's voting intentions, although obviously it did shift some attention away from losing the debate, and it may have muted criticisms of his attacks on illegal immigrants in Springfield. And then there was a very interesting poll as well, in terms of state polls. I wanted to show you, Chaz. This came out of the state of Iowa. Now, we don't talk too much about Iowa except at caucus time in the primaries these days, but Iowa was a crucial battleground state for decades. Obama won it twice, but more recently, the whole state has shifted sharply towards Republicans, particularly Trump. He won by close to 10 points both times he ran there. In June, the esteemed Des Moines Register poll had Trump leading Joe Biden by a whopping 18 points. But now, against Harris, that's been slashed to just 4. And although Kennedy is out, he's still on the ballot in Iowa, and 6% of Iowans say he still has their support. So I don't know what to make of that. But I'm not suggesting that Kamala Harris, Chaz, is likely to win Iowa, but getting close, gaining 11 points and making it competitive again, does offer another bit of evidence that maybe Harris is assembling that Barack Obama coalition of Democrats that meant that he was able to win in Iowa, able to win in North Carolina that we were talking about as well. She's not winning in those states yet, but she's getting much closer than Joe Biden was, and indeed closer than either Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden in 2020 managed to do. So she is shifting the dial somewhat.
Yeah, and you raise the Iowa poll because that poll, that Des Moines Register poll, is considered to be the most accurate poll in America.
The gold standard poll.
Totally, they seem to be always right. So, it's a nice yardstick for people to use. I think we shouldn't brush past North Carolina there. Like you made the point about Mark Robinson. If they just stop investing in Mark Robinson and he starts running dead, then that might, and they demoralise Republican voters in North Carolina. It only takes a half point or 1 point less in North Carolina to make it a potentially Democrat victory.
Yeah.
And if Harris wins North Carolina, then she can afford to lose Wisconsin, no problems. If she wins North Carolina and Nevada, which she's ahead in at the moment, she can afford to lose Pennsylvania. So that North Carolina gives them a lot of options, and they have a very popular governor there right now.
Yeah, Roy Cooper.
Yeah, to help them out. So that's a key one there. Republicans have been pointing to Gallup as a bit of a one-off, where Harris had terrible favourability results this week. There was like a turnaround net favourability between Harris and Trump by about 14 points. So that Trump is now ahead of her on net favourability. That's all they've got. Apart from that,
no other polls are showing that at the moment.
Yeah, as I say, apart from that, the polls have been pretty good for Harris. Although I did notice 538 has closed up a little bit this morning. Since the 3.3, it's now 2.8. But whatever. I want to point one more point poll out to you, which is, you talk about one-off polls. The Morning Consult had Texas having Ted Cruz losing in the Senate poll there. Colin Allred, who's this moderate Democrat footballer, I don't think there's any chance that he's going to win in Texas. I think Ted Cruz is going to win. But if that keeps up for another couple of weeks, the Democrats have probably given up on Montana already. They might think, let's plunge $100 million or $150 million into Texas as our last chance to try and keep the Senate, because they need one more seat. And if it's not Montana, then Texas might be the bet. You might be about to hear a lot about Ted Cruz's seat over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how many Republicans want to pour in millions of dollars to help Ted Cruz, because he's not the most popular guy on Capitol Hill. Now, we know that the polls right now are not a prediction of what is going to happen in November on Election Day, more of a snapshot of what voters are thinking in mid to late September. And a bit of a blurry snapshot at that, when most of those battleground states are still within the margin of error between Trump and Harris. It's basically a coin toss. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Or do they? There is one predictive model, not based on polls, but based on an analysis of history, that has successfully predicted the outcome of 9 of the past 10 presidential elections. Allan Lichtman, Professor of History at American University, formulated this model based on what he calls the 13 keys to the White House. And they focus on the incumbent party and consider things like whether there was a serious contest for their nomination. Is the economy in a recession? Have they been tainted by scandal? Is the candidate charismatic? If 8 or more of these keys are true rather than false, then he predicts the incumbent party will win. And on that basis, on the basis of those keys, Allan Lichtman says Kamala Harris will win the White House this November. His system, despite that 90% success rate, is not without its critics though, including polling analyst Nate Silver. When Lichtman's system was being used by Biden supporters to claim that he was still going to win this year despite that terrible debate back in June, Nate Silver tweeted, "None of the 13 keys is that the president is unable to reliably complete a sentence, but that seems salient to diagnosing his chances for re-election." Well, let's find out more about those keys and Allan Lichtman's answer to some of the criticisms. He's with us from Washington, DC. Professor, welcome to the Fireside Chat.
Thank you.
So, Alan, can you talk us through briefly just how you arrived on this system, this model called the keys, which has pretty impressive track record for predicting the winner of the White House?
You know, I'd love to tell you I came across the keys to the White House, my prediction system, by rooting my eyes in the archives and deep contemplation. But if I were to tell you that, to quote the late, not so great Richard Nixon, that would be wrong. I came across the keys largely serendipitously when I was a distinguished visiting scholar at Caltech in Southern California in 1981. And there I met the world's leading authority in earthquake prediction, Vladimir Kailis-Borak from Moscow. And it was actually his idea that we become the odd couple of American political analysis, using my knowledge of US history, politics, and the presidency, and his methodology of pattern recognition. So what we did was we looked at every American presidential election from the horse and buggy days of politics, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, through the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. This is 81. And we use pattern recognition to discern what features the political environment could distinguish between victories for the White House party and defeats for the White House party. And this empirical analysis led to the 13 keys to the White House, which were 13 indicators that could best distinguish between incumbent victories and defeats. And this yielded a simple decision rule. If 6 or more of the keys went against the White House party, they were predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they were predicted winners. And the keys are not random. They are based upon the principle that American presidential elections are primarily votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And that is what the keys gauge.
Okay, Alan, let's talk about the one that you got wrong. 2000, Al Gore and George W. Bush. You said Al Gore had the keys to the White House, that he was going to win. George Bush wins, only by 537 votes in the state of Florida, but still, Bush won that election. So what went wrong?
Yes, what happened in 2000 is the wrong person was elected president. Based on the intent of the voters, Al Gore, who I picked, should have won going away in Florida and won the presidency. I proved this in my report to the United States Commission on Civil Rights, which showed a vast disproportion in the percentage of votes by people who voted, discarded, thrown away by African Americans as compared to whites. And most of those votes that were thrown away for African Americans were not those hanging chads or dimples. They were so-called overvotes, where African Americans, quite rightly, didn't trust the system in Florida run by the candidate's brother. So they punched in Gore and they wrote in Gore just to make sure. And all of those votes were thrown out by Florida. Don't take my word for it. An independent study, I had nothing to do with it, by Professor Walter Mebane of Cornell University, was entitled "The Wrong Man is President!" And he proved that based on the intent of the voters, Al Gore should have won by tens of thousands of votes. By the way, just 3 years later, a bipartisan majority of the US Congress passed the Help America Vote Act, which stipulated in federal elections you can't throw out those so-called overvotes. You've got to give the voter a chance to make a correction. Had that law been in effect in 2000, there would have been that Al Gore would win.
Now, Professor, there's a bit of subjectivity about these predictions, though, isn't there? Like, for instance, major policy change. That key there, different people would interpret that in different ways, I would have thought. Looking back at your past predictions as well, you gave Barack Obama the charisma key in 2008, but not in 2012. So isn't there some subjectivity there?
You know, when I first developed the keys, I was blasted by the professional forecasters for the cardinal sin of subjectivity. And I explained, my keys are not subjective. Some of them, not all of them, are judgmental. And we're dealing with human beings, and historians like myself make judgments all the time. Moreover, these judgments are very tightly constrained. Each key is very carefully defined at length, and I've answered each key since 1860. Well, it took 15 to 20 years, and the entire forecasting community came around realizing their so-called non-subjective quantitative models didn't work. And the best models were like the keys, which combined judgmental and quantitative indicators. And you say, Barack Obama was considered charismatic in 2008, but not 2012. That was not a hard call. Barack Obama fell victim of what we call the Washington bubble, surrounded by handlers and pollsters and ad men, which brought him right down to the lowest common denominator, which we saw in that first debate against Mitt Romney, when Obama performed worse than Joe Biden in the debate that drove him out of the race. 33% thought Biden won the debate. Only 20% thought Obama won the debate. So it was not a difficult call. Could I be wrong? Of course. I'm a human being. Things can change. But this system has worked prospectively for 40 years and retrospectively for 160 years. And judgment, I would claim, is a benefit, not a detriment to the system.
And Alan, let's talk a little bit about how your system doesn't take into account things like Joe Biden's catastrophic debate performance back in June, which ultimately, of course, forced him to drop out of the presidential race. So he lost the keys to everything, including the White House, right then. Is that a shortcoming of the system, would you say?
Every 4 years, critics say to me, you got to change your keys. We have an African-American running. Never had that. We're not ready to elect an African-American. We have a woman running. We have a major party candidate bragging on tape that he was grabbing women by their private parts. Never had that. You have to change your keys. Of course, I didn't change my keys. I predicted all of those elections correctly. And the keys fully took into account the change over from Biden to Harris. Yes, I was very critical of what the Democrats were doing. They were openly trashing, in a very vicious way, their sitting president, who had been nominated by 87% of the voters. I've studied American politics since the founding. I've never seen anything like that. I also thought the Democrats were heading for disaster. Obviously, they were going to push Biden out. That would cost them the incumbency key. That by itself wouldn't be fatal, but I thought they were also heading for a big party brawl, which would cost them the contest key as well. No incumbent party has ever won re-election since 1900, when they lost both those keys. I don't know if the Democrats listened to me or just grew a spine and a brain, but they united behind Harris, which means they only lost one key, the incumbency key. And as it turned out, Harris probably has had a positive effect on two other keys. The third party key, the fizzling of RFK Jr., maybe because voters no longer had to decide between two old white guys. I hate saying that, being an old white guy myself, but I think it's true.
Now, the classic knock on all this genre of election models like the keys is that they don't refer to candidate quality at all. So, for example, my dog Mercury would probably struggle to pass constitutional muster, yes, but should he somehow get nominated by the Democrats, the keys would still see him as a favourite for the presidency, wouldn't they? How do you respond to those concerns?
That's false. I don't speculate about what might have happened if things had turned out differently. You never know. And that's a fool's errand. Yes, if Biden had stayed in, they would have sustained the contest key and the incumbency key, but they may well have lost the third party and social unrest key. We don't know. And that's why, I'm constantly asked to speculate what might happen if this or that had been different. And I resolutely decline to do so. You can't pull something out of history and know what the consequences are going to be. I make my predictions based on the conditions that actually exist.
Now, Professor, you've said that models need to stay the same all the time. You can't pick and choose as time goes on. But didn't you used to be of the view that the Keyes model predicted the popular vote, whereas now you're talking about the Keyes model predicting the Electoral College vote, which is a very, very different thing. And obviously you would have gotten 2016 wrong if you were talking about the popular vote instead of the Electoral College vote.
I've got to correct you again. I've been continually baselessly attacked, claiming I predicted Trump winning the popular vote. False, false, false. And I've really got to come down hard on this. I quite clearly, in my prediction in the Washington Post, said Trump is going to win the election. I said nothing about the popular vote. In fact, I predicted at that same time in that same interview that Trump would be impeached, which made no sense if I was only talking about the popular vote. I got a letter of congratulations from Donald Trump for predicting his win, which would have made no sense if I was talking about the popular vote. The academic community lined up and lauding me as one of the very few forecasters who predicted the Trump win. Turns out when you look at 1860 through 1980, the developmental period, there's no daylight between the popular vote and the electoral college vote, except two very special elections coming out of Reconstruction that have no bearing. The disputed election of 1876 and the election of 1988, after white supremacists had suppressed the Black Republican vote in the South. And so Grover Cleveland could pile up huge popular vote majorities in the South while still losing the Electoral College. We've now had that kind of situation in reverse, that Republicans basically can't win the popular vote. Democrats pick up more than 5 million extra popular votes from just two states, New York and California. No comparable Republican states. That's why I don't talk about the popular vote at all. If you look at my predictions in 2016 and 2020, I only call winners, which are consistent, taking out those two very special cases with the whole history of the Keys in its development and in its calls through, of course, we discussed 2000.
Sorry, Professor, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you didn't call Donald Trump as the winner of the 2016 election. I know you did. But what I'm saying is that in 2012, you wrote, quote, "As a national system, the Keys predict the popular vote, not the state-by-state tally of electoral college votes." But now you're saying that the Keys predict electoral college votes. So hasn't that changed since 2012?
Yes, and that's changed. I mean, there's no point in predicting the popular vote. As I said, I'm not sure what you're quoting there, but as I said, historically, there hasn't been daylight between the popular vote and the electoral college vote until recently. And that's why I only call winners. I'm not sure, I've written a lot, some of my articles, I've said quite clearly that, and my book, if you look at my book, I've said quite clearly, there's no longer any point. If you're calling a Democrat, it doesn't matter, because if they're going to win the electoral college, they're also going to win the popular vote.
Professor Allan Lichtman, thank you very much indeed for having a fireside chat with us.
My pleasure. Take care.
Just coming off the back there of that interview, I was a little bit unfair to Allan Lichtman by throwing that quote in his face, which he wasn't expecting. We gave him no notice about that. But I just want you to realise that that's not a one-off. That Allan Lichtman has said basically identical things for many times. I've found at least 4 occasions, and I didn't look very hard, over the years before the 2016 election. And in fact, in his actual prediction, his academic paper in 2016, not a New York Times piece, his actual academic paper where he was predicting the 2016 outcome, he used exactly the same phrase. Let me read it to you again. The Keys predict the popular vote, not the state-by-state tally of electoral college votes.
Right.
And just to be clear, in 2016, he predicted Donald Trump was the winner. Now, if the Keys predicted the popular vote, then he was wrong.
Right.
Having said that, I did put that to him. You heard his answer, and you can decide if that's good enough for you. So so make up your own mind. But I just want to be very clear about exactly what my little grievance is, my little nerdy grievance.
Yeah, sure, I see what you mean. And look, worst comes to the worst, even if he did sort of switch the measure of success in 2016 around because Democrats keep winning the popular vote and losing in the Electoral College, still, 8 out of 10 ain't bad for Allan Lichtman.
For what it's worth, I actually think his system is very good.
Yeah.
I just think he oversells it just a little bit.
Maybe you're right. That's all for this Fireside Chat. We will be back at the same time next week, and we'll see you for Planet America on Wednesday night on ABC TV.
Both shows are on ABC iView, YouTube, and Facebook. And do not forget about the Pet Podcast in all the very finest pod places.
Bye-bye.